It started like any other quiet morning, the kind where the sun filters in through the curtains just right, warm and slow, like the day is promising peace. I was in the kitchen, barefoot, wrapping my hands around a warm mug while the coffee machine did its usual hum. The smell, the sound. It's funny how those little things used to feel like comfort. I glanced over and saw Thomas's laptop left open on the dining table. There it was. One new message blinking. I hesitated. But something in me, something I can't explain, made me walk over. I tapped the trackpad, just once. The message popped open. A group chat. Thomas and a few of his closest friends. I skimmed the screen, not even sure what I was looking for, until the words hit me like ice water. I'm just waiting for her to receive her father's millions. Then I'm gone. I'm already talking to better options. I froze. My heart didn't even race. It just stopped. I reread it, thinking maybe I'd misunderstood. But no, it was clear, calculated, cold. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stood there, coffee growing cold in my hand, staring at a man I thought I knew, and realizing he'd never really been mine. It wasn't heartbreak I felt first. It was silence. A deep, pressing silence that wrapped around my chest and whispered, "Think." And so I did. Not about confrontation, not about pleading. No, I started thinking about something else entirely. I sat down at the table, laptop still glowing, that message still staring back at me. My hands were steady now, my breath slow. Isn't it strange how, in the moments that should break us, something inside sharpens instead? I wasn't devastated. I was focused. Every memory of him, the whispered I love yous, the weekend getaways, the way he used to hold my hand in public, they all felt like borrowed scenes from someone else's life. I had no idea how long he'd been planning this, but it didn't matter. I knew enough. What cut the deepest wasn't just the betrayal. It was how easy it was for him to write those words. Like I was a stepping stone, a placeholder, a fool. And worse, I'd let him get close to the most sacred part of me, my trust. My father had spent his life building that fortune, piece by piece, and now I was days away from receiving it. I used to think Thomas would be by my side through it all. Turns out he was just waiting at the finish line, ready to collect his prize and run. I could have confronted him right then, stormed up the stairs, thrown the laptop at the wall and screamed every word he deserved to hear. But I didn't. That would have been too easy for him, too expected. Instead, I closed the laptop, sipped the rest of my cold coffee, and looked out the window. The morning wasn't peaceful anymore, but it was clear. I wasn't going to fall apart. I was going to get ready. Because if Thomas thought he was the only one who could play dirty, he was about to learn something new. I spent the rest of that day pretending everything was normal. I made him lunch. I smiled when he walked into the room. I even asked about his meetings, nodding while he lied through his teeth. It was almost laughable, watching him play the devoted husband, thinking he was fooling me. But I was watching closely now. Every word, every glance at his phone, every fake yawn when he said he was going to bed early. It's wild how quickly love can curdle into calculation when truth hits you like that. Later that night, while he showered, I found myself staring at him through the bathroom mirror. Not with hate, not even anger, just observation. Like I was studying a stranger who had once worn the skin of someone I loved. I noticed things I'd ignored before, the dismissive tone, the distant eyes, the smirk he wore when he thought I wasn't looking. He had no idea I knew, and that was my power. In his mind, I was still the doting wife, the woman with no clue what was coming. But oh, I knew. I knew the game now, and I wasn't going to lose. If Thomas wanted a clean exit after the inheritance hit, he'd get one, just not the kind he imagined. The moment I read that message, something inside me shifted. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to warn. I was going to protect everything my father had worked for, and make sure Thomas walked away with exactly what he deserved. And that meant only one thing. The next morning, I woke up before him. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, replaying his words in my mind like a song stuck on repeat. But this time, I wasn't angry. I was calculating. I knew the inheritance papers were days from being finalized. And I knew that as soon as that money hit my account, Thomas would make his move. But there was something else I knew. Our marriage wasn't just emotional, it was legal. And that gave me an opening. I started researching, quietly, carefully. Every lunch break, every moment alone, I dove deep into marital property law. We were under partial community of property. That meant in a divorce, Thomas could legally claim half of everything, even what was never his to begin with, including my inheritance. The idea made my stomach twist. My father's money, built with sweat and sacrifice, ending up in the hands of a man who only saw me as a bank account waiting to mature? I wasn't going to let that happen. I found loopholes, clauses, quiet forums, and legal blogs that most people don't even know exist. And then I saw it, the possibility of changing our marital regime. It wasn't simple, and it wasn't entirely clean, but it was legal. If done right, it would require his signature. Or something that looked close enough. My hands shook a little as I imagined it. I'd never forged anything in my life, but this wasn't about rebellion. This was about survival, about justice, and yes, maybe a little revenge. The night I did it, he was in the living room watching a game, laughing at his phone, probably texting one of those better options he bragged about. I sat at the kitchen counter, heart pounding, laptop open, documents lined up, everything perfectly prepared. I'd practiced his signature, over and over, until it felt like second nature. I even whispered his name out loud, like I was channeling his arrogance through my pen. When I finally signed it, it didn't feel like a crime. It felt like taking back control. I used a legal contact my father once trusted, someone who owed me a favor, someone discreet. The paperwork moved faster than I expected. Within days, the marital regime was changed. Complete separation of assets. Quietly. Permanently. And Thomas? He had no clue. Still smiling over dinners, still tossing me kisses in the hallway like we were living some fairy tale. I started looking at him the way a chess player looks at their opponent. Calculating, patient, 5 moves ahead. There was something oddly empowering in the secrecy. Knowing that while he plotted my downfall, I was quietly building the walls that would keep him out. I didn't feel guilty. I felt awake. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for him to lead. I was creating my own ending. And every time I heard him lie about his day or kiss my cheek with that empty affection, I smiled back. Because he was playing the part of a husband, and I was playing the part of a fool. Only one of us was pretending. When the confirmation letter arrived, I held it in my hands like it was a weapon and a shield all at once. I read every line, twice. Then again. It was official. Legally sealed. Everything my father left me. Untouchable. I folded the papers, slid them into a folder, and tucked it away in the back of my closet behind an old box of winter scarves. If Thomas ever found it, everything would unravel. But he wouldn't. He didn't pay attention to details. That was always his weakness. He kept talking about our bright future, kept asking what I'd do with the inheritance once it arrived. I'd smile and say things like, "We'll decide together." That word, "we," burned in my mouth. But I used it, over and over, because I needed him to feel safe, secure, blind. He never suspected a thing. If anything, he seemed more relaxed, like he was already halfway out the door, dreaming about his next chapter with someone younger, someone better. That's what made it satisfying. He had no idea his plan was already dead. There was no going back now. I'd crossed the line, forged a signature, changed our legal lives, and not a soul knew but me. I should have been scared, but I wasn't. I felt like a woman watching the storm roll in, holding the umbrella, knowing I was ready. He could betray me all he wanted. He could lie to my face every day, but he was walking straight into the biggest mistake of his life, and I was the one holding the door open for him. I became everything he wanted me to be. Sweet, supportive, soft. I laughed at his stories, touched his arm when he spoke, made him breakfast like I used to in the early days. It was a performance, sure, but strangely, it came easily. Pretending to love someone who betrayed you is a special kind of acting, but I'd had years of practice smiling through disappointment. Now I was just doing it with purpose. Every kind word, every gentle gesture, it was all part of the plan. He didn't suspect a thing. In fact, he seemed more confident than ever, more smug, like he'd already won, and I was too naive to see it. He started staying out later, taking calls in the other room. I'd hear him say things like, "I can't talk right now," or, "She's still here." He thought I wasn't paying attention, but I was. I kept a log, dates, times, the way his voice changed when he spoke to her, or them, or whoever was waiting in the wings. I wasn't documenting for court. I was documenting for myself. Because one day, I wanted to look him in the eyes and let him know I'd seen it all. Every lie, every betrayal. I wanted him to know that while he thought he was playing me, I was memorizing the entire game. I took screenshots when he left his phone unlocked. I backed up his messages. And still, I smiled, kissed his cheek, folded his laundry. I was the picture of a devoted wife. And every time he looked at me, I made sure he saw exactly what he expected. He asked me one night if I was excited about the inheritance finally arriving. I looked him right in the eyes and said, "Of course, baby. We deserve this." I almost choked on the word "we," but I said it with warmth, with trust, like the old me would have. He grinned, kissed my forehead, and went back to texting on his phone, probably lining up his next option. The irony? The money was already mine, fully, protected. He was celebrating a fortune he'd never touch. That week, he started buying things. Nothing outrageous, just little signs of someone preparing for a new life. New clothes, upgraded phone, dinner reservations he never invited me to. I'd hear him in the other room, laughing in ways I hadn't heard in months, the kind of laughter that belongs to a man who thinks he's free. I played along, asking if he wanted me to come with him sometimes, knowing he'd say no. And he did. Every time. I let him believe he was drifting away undetected, but I saw it all. The lies, the shift in his tone, the growing distance. I even caught the reflection of his smile in the window one night as he texted her. That smile, it used to be mine. And now, it felt like watching a stranger steal my life while standing right in front of me. I didn't flinch. I didn't interrupt. I just took another mental note. He thought he was getting away with it. And I wanted him to think that. Because when the curtain finally fell, I wanted the look on his face to be real. There were moments, small, fleeting ones, when I'd catch myself staring at him and wondering who he really was. Had he always been like this? Or did something break along the way? I'd remember our wedding, the vows, the way he held my hand with shaking fingers. It used to feel sacred. Now it felt like a well-rehearsed script he never meant to keep. But I didn't let the grief in, not fully. Grief softens you. I needed to stay sharp, cold even, at least for now. He grew bolder as the days passed. More distracted, more careless. One night, he didn't come home until almost 2 a.m., told me he'd been stuck in meetings. I kissed his cheek, handed him a glass of water, and asked if he wanted to shower. He looked at me, a little surprised, maybe even guilty, but I smiled, soft, loving, blind. And he relaxed. That was his mistake. He mistook my calm for ignorance, and that's exactly what I needed him to do. He thought he was leading the story, guiding it toward the ending he'd planned all along. But what he didn't know, what he couldn't know, was that I'd already written the final scene. The one where he walks away thinking he's won, only to discover he was never in control to begin with. Every step he took toward that door, every lie he whispered into the night. I was holding the pen. And soon, he'd read the ending for himself. He sat me down at the kitchen table, that same place where I'd read his message weeks earlier. The irony wasn't lost on me. He cleared his throat, gave me that rehearsed, solemn look. "I think we've grown apart, he said, like he was mourning something real. I tilted my head, nodded slowly, let the silence stretch between us like a string he didn't know was already fraying. He tried to act heartbroken, like the decision was mutual, like he hadn't already moved on in his head, and probably in his bed. I said the words he expected to hear. Maybe you're right. I even reached for his hand, gave it a squeeze, as if I was the one who still cared. The relief that washed over his face made me want to laugh. He thought it was going to be easy. He thought this was the part where he walks away with half my father's money and a fresh start, free of guilt. He didn't know he'd already forfeited the prize, that while he was out choosing better options, I was locking every door behind him. We met with the lawyer the following week. He was all smiles, playing the role of the reasonable ex. I wore a simple black dress and didn't say much, let him enjoy his last few moments of ignorance, and then, just like that, it happened. The lawyer pulled out the updated marital agreement and slid it across the table. As this change was filed and approved prior to the inheritance transfer, Mr. Thomas is not entitled to any portion of the estate. The room went still. He blinked, then blinked again, confused, off script. He turned to me, eyes narrowed like he hadn't heard correctly. Wait, what is this? His voice cracked, not with sadness, but with panic. The lawyer calmly repeated the clause, pointing to the date of approval, the signatures, the legality of it all. I didn't say a word. I let the weight of it sink into him, slowly, painfully. He looked at me like I'd betrayed him. And that's when I realized he actually believed he was the victim here, that I had done something cruel, that I had crossed the line. I reached into my purse and pulled out the final touch, a copy of the form, the forged signature. His signature, the one I'd practiced under fluorescent light, night after night. I placed it gently on the table and slid it toward him. You were going to leave me the moment the money came through, I said quietly. I just made sure you didn't take it with you. His face went white, completely still. Like every version of his future had just collapsed right in front of him, because they had. I didn't gloat. I didn't scream. That would have given him power. Instead, I sat still, spine straight, and met his gaze with something stronger than fury, clarity. You weren't the only one making plans, I said, and he finally understood. Every fake smile, every quiet evening, every night I let him believe he was getting away with it. I had been setting the stage. He rose to his feet, demanded the lawyer do something, fix it, stop it. But it was already done, and there was no undoing what he never saw coming. He paced the room, running a hand through his hair like he could undo what just happened. His voice got louder, more desperate, shifting between denial and blame. This isn't fair, he said. You tricked me. I wanted to laugh. Fair? As if lying to your wife, waiting for her to inherit a fortune, and planning to leave her for someone else was fair? I stood up slowly, collected the papers, and met his eyes one last time. You planned to take everything from me, I said. I just made sure you didn't. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. I think part of him still couldn't believe it, that I had beaten him at his own game, that the woman he underestimated, the one he thought was too soft, too trusting, was the same woman who had just closed every exit he thought he had. I didn't feel guilty, not for a second. He didn't just betray me. He betrayed the life we built, the promises he made, and the version of myself I sacrificed to be with him. And now, he had to live with the ruins. I walked out of that office lighter than I'd felt in years. No chains, no fear, just silence and strength. Behind me, Thomas sat with his head in his hands, stunned by the reality he never saw coming. He had played the long game for money, but I had played for something bigger, my dignity, my future, my freedom. And as the door closed behind me, I didn't look back. There was nothing left to see. What came next? That was mine to define. Word spread quickly. People talk. Friends, colleagues, even neighbors who never looked twice suddenly had opinions, whispers, and stares. At first, I didn't care what anyone thought, but then I realized most of the whispers weren't about me. They were about him. Thomas, the man who lost everything. The man whose better options disappeared the moment his bank account didn't grow the way he promised. One by one, they vanished. Turns out, women looking for wealth aren't impressed by empty hands and a bruised ego. He tried reaching out. Texts, missed calls, long emails full of half-truths and flimsy apologies. He even showed up at my gate one afternoon, wilted flowers in hand, looking more like a ghost than the man I once married. I didn't open the door. I didn't even flinch. I watched from the upstairs window, champagne glass in hand, heart completely still. He had already said everything I needed to hear in that message weeks ago. The rest? Noise. Just noise. I didn't want revenge anymore. Not really. What I wanted, and finally had, was peace. And let me tell you something. Peace feels nothing like triumph. It's softer, quieter. It wraps around you like a warm blanket, asking nothing in return. I used a portion of the inheritance to support a legal aid program for women. Something meaningful, something lasting, not for applause, just because it felt right, because for the first time in a long time, I got to choose what mattered. My days changed slowly, then all at once. I started waking up without that tightness in my chest. No more pretending, no more second-guessing if I was enough. I traveled. I read more. I cooked in silence with music playing low. And sometimes, I danced in the kitchen alone, just because I could. Freedom has a flavor. It tastes like coffee you don't have to rush, like laughter that isn't forced, like space you don't need to share with someone who lied to your face. People started seeing me differently. Some with admiration, others with envy. A few even asked how I did it. I never told them the whole truth. Not because I was ashamed, but because some victories don't need to be shouted. They're felt. In the quiet moments. In the strength it takes to walk away without burning the whole house down. I never became bitter. I became deliberate. And there's a power in that. A calm, steady power no one can steal from you once it's yours. Then, one evening, as the sun dipped behind the city skyline, my phone lit up. His name, a message. Please, can we talk? I stared at the screen, not with hate, not even anger. Just clarity. That chapter was over, and nothing he could say would reopen it. I smiled, took a slow sip of champagne, and with one gentle flick of my thumb, I deleted the message. It felt good, not dramatic, just final, like shutting a door and turning to face something better. I stepped out onto the balcony, the evening breeze brushing against my skin like a whispered reminder. You made it. Below, the city moved on like it always does. Cars, laughter, lives colliding and continuing. But up here, I was still. Whole. No more masks, no more waiting for someone to choose me. I had chosen myself. That was the real inheritance, not the money, not the assets, but the clarity, the strength, the unshakable knowing that I had survived something that once tried to break me. There's something poetic about endings, the quiet ones, especially. No slamming doors, no screaming matches, just a soft shift, a woman who was once deceived, now defining her own story. I thought I needed revenge. What I needed was closure. And this was it. The champagne sparkled in my glass. The sunset painted gold across the sky. Somewhere out there, he was probably still telling himself I got lucky, that he almost had it all. And maybe that's true. But here's what he'll never understand. He wanted the money, but I took the future.